Hey guys, Jim Wood here. In this one, we're going to go over the UI as a whole in RadGen as of version 3. We're going to bundle in multi-level radars, just because they fit in with the UI. It's worthwhile just shoving it in here so they go together. So let's just get into it. So first of all, you've got the obvious stuff: file, new save, open. And the open directory is going to open up your actual directory where your RadGen file is, which is going to be next to your VMAP files or file in the content folder of the add-on. What I should quickly say, actually, when you do file new, just make sure you select the appropriate VMAP it corresponds to. That's how you have your project. It basically just matches your VMAP's name and it sits next to it. However, if you're wanting to change the VMAP that a project is pointed at, it is most useful and mostly only useful when you're doing something like greyboxing and versioning a VMAP. Say, for example, you go from V1 to V2, you might want to keep the project file you've used for V1, but point it at V2. Obviously, you could just create a new RadGen project for V2. But yeah, if you've been configuring any values in here or things like that, then you can instead open up your V1 RadGen project, click Switch VMAP, head over to the new VMAP version that you want to use, double click it, gives you the option for keeping a copy of the RadGen project for the VMAP it's currently pointed at. It's up to you if you want to do that. I probably would, just for the sake of it. And then just because I've got some unsaved changes, it's just going to ask if I want to save it. So what that's done is it's given me, it's kept my V1 RadGen file, but it's duplicated and it's basically pointed it at V2 now. If I'd have obviously selected to not keep it, this one would have been removed and I only would have had V2. I'm actually going to switch this back. We're currently in V2, but there's nothing in the V2 VMAP. That's why it's currently shown as empty. I'm going to switch it back to V1. I'm going to overwrite the one that we kind of left, even though I don't need to, just for the sake of this video. I'm going to say no, I don't want to keep a copy. And then that, as you can see here, I clicked the wrong button, but that would have removed the V2 file. We're not professional. I'm just going to ride through. But yeah, if I'd have clicked no, it wouldn't have saved the V2 version of the VMAP. So that's that. And then obviously you've got your recent files that you've had open. It's just an easy way of opening. Edit, undo, and redo. Just grayed out because I've not made any changes here. To the turntable tool, I'm going to skip over that. I'm going to do a separate video on that as it's quite a bit. There's quite a bit with that. Your settings, you've got the option to load the previous project on startup. I personally do use this, usually because when I'm working on a radar, or on a map in general, usually working on one. Not necessarily at a time, but usually working on the same map, so it's generally pretty useful. However, if you're bouncing around over different VMAPs quite often, it's probably not. It's whatever you want to do, but it might be useful leaving it off in that scenario, as when you open a RadGen project, it is going to load everything from the VMAP, so it might take a bit of time, a few seconds at the start, but it's up to you. Then we just have some themes that you can flick through. Personal favourites for me would be the RadGen theme 1, based around the RadGen logo colours. And the RadGen theme 2 is an eyesore, but vintage Steam theme, the old vintage Steam colours. Big fan of this one as well. So you've got a couple of things down there, allows you to copy and the theme settings and load them back in if you need to. But yeah, likely not going to be using that. Update notes. this will open every time you download a new version of the software. But you've got a button here for it as well. Just obviously explains the updates and the upcoming updates in v3.01, which may be out before these videos. And then just an about page showing your current version. Me and Angel, whatever your name is. Obviously as developers. And then just special thanks to Jansel, Seth, and Whaleman for their contributions and help along the way. Jansel's plugin, which he has created for Substance Designer that works with RadGen, we'll go through in a separate video as well. So we've got our path colors, the gradient colors. Obviously we've got a few paths in the levels, so we can see how these change. The high and low values or color values for them being the lowest point in the level and the highest point in the level. I'm going to click on the lowest, and we've got our color picker tool here. So what we're going to do is we're going to, let's just change it to a, let's go with green or yellow, potentially. Let's go with bright yellow. You've got your RGB values you can set. You can set a hex value there instead if you want to. And then you can change your hue. And then you've got the other sliders as well. The kind of stuff you'll see in Photoshop. If you want to use those, it all works very responsively, which is nice. But I'm going to go with the yellow. And then what I'm going to do is for the high, I'm actually going to use this eyedropper tool, which if you hold it down after clicking, just works as an eyedropper and allows you to just take any color you want. Let's go with that blue in the text if I can get it. Bingo. There we go. Let go once you're hovering over the color you want, and it'll immediately just use it. So yeah, click, hold, drag over the color you want, and then let go. Perfect. Not a great combination of colors. We're going to go garish. Why not? So we've got our path colors set. I mean, cover, I'd probably leave as they are. Flicks between a kind of not a dark grey, but a medium grey, straight up to high, being quite a nice clean white-ish colour. We can see the different colours in the shading on the heights based on how kind of light the top of this barrel is, and how these smaller covers are darker because they're lower down in the level. We can set the buy zone, bomb sites, and rescue zone colours if we wish. I mean, personally, I would always leave it as this kind of greens colours we've set, but if you fancy a change it. You can change the alpha values of them as well individually if you click the right thing. So yeah, and then you've got the rescue zone dash, which you can change here. Going to quickly, click the right thing, show this. Better here, you can see how higher values they are, the less dashes you get, and then the lower it is, the more dashes you are getting. So let's go back to the top-down view. Probably a good time to go over these previews. Actually, no, I'll leave it till after I finish the settings. So, export resolution, I would probably just do 2048. The game downscales to 1024 anyway, but why not do 2048, and then you can easily just use those images for advertisement as well. Super sampling, anti-aliasing, that's what it says on the tin. If you want anti-aliasing, leave it on. I would. You can export raw masks, which are the raw masks that Jansel's Substance Designer plugin will use. So we'll leave that on. Why not? We'll go through that in a separate video. Export game files, I would always leave on, and you can export PNG or JPEG of your radars as well. Stroke, easy, turn it on. Immediately just goes around the whole edges of your level. Obviously, a little bit jagged there because of the overlap design. Obviously, it's not the best place for stroke, but generally speaking, I can't, you're not really going to have a remove mesh in the middle of these anyway. Generally speaking, always looks very nice. Would be better if I was doing a top-down view so the lines were proper straight. And now you'll see it's actually fine. It was the camera angle that was adding those jagged lines, so ignore me there. You can obviously change the alpha, change the color if you wish, but white's kind of obviously a standard color for the stroke. Not really used as much in CS2 as it was in CSGO, but it's an option. And then you can also add stroke around the cover if you wish. And alpha, color, as we said before. Now I just missed off the width of the stroke, so you can easily just set any value you want for the stroke. 10 is being the max, already very garish. I would set it to say 2, maybe 3 at a stretch. Although, like I said, not always used nowadays in CSGO, CS2 anyway. So you got some effects here. Environment light strength. So the RadGen will actually use the light environment entity inside your map to actually portray angle from where the lighting source is coming from. As you can see, changing here on this prop. You've got ambient light strength, and a bunch of other things you might want to tweak. Personally, I would always leave AO on, as it adds a massive. It's just obviously way nicer, especially around the overlap and the prop. Much nicer with AO on. You can easily change the strength if you want. I wouldn't set it too high, as it can create kind of dark. I think make some edges look quite very dark, but you can have a play around, whatever's best for you. You got the edge ambient occlusion, strength, and the radius as well, which I wouldn't mess with too much. But once again, play around with what's best for you. I'll come back to multi-level radar. I'll just go down here. So mesh entity names to exclude. This just basically allows you to exclude entities with certain target names. This is preset to byzone.2v2 because that is the target name, at least currently as of this video, that Valve use in their scripts for wingman byzones that are in the inside of 5v5 classic maps. So their scripts basically enable disable them, so we don't want to show them in our radars. So this will automatically ignore the byzones, assuming you've named them with that target name. And you can add more if you like, it's up to you. You add a pipe and then whatever entity name you want there, and they'll all be ignored by RadGen. You can also decide whether or not you want to include hidden map objects. I would just leave this enabled. Well, it's up to you. If I was using the materials method for creating stuff for RadGen with meshes and stuff, if I was going down the materials route, I would leave this enabled and then add all of those materials to a selection set and disable them, so they're not taking up any of your view inside of Hammer. You can. They do classic tool textures, so clicking the button that hides tool textures will also hide the RadGen ones, but I think that's a lot cleaner. But yeah, if you never wanted to do it, just disable it. It's up to you. And then we've got the update from VMAP button. As I've shown, it just means that any updates I've made inside of Hammer for a VMAP, once that VMAP has been saved, I can come in here, click update, and it will automatically update and show the changes that I've made in Hammer. And then save radar image. All that's going to do is it's going to save the radar image. I'll show that now actually. So in my content folder, panorama, images, overhead maps, this is the location you're going to see it. If I click save, what you're going to see here is a TGA file, a PNG file, because I've got my options set to export the game files and export a PNG, but it's also going to export this vtext file. That's just used for automatically compiling the radar, so that if you go into the game folder and I actually had it running in game, which I'll just do it. Why not? Let's do a fast compile. What that'll do is I'll just make sure that the actual radar compiles and it gets used in game. Tell you what, let's just go directly to it. Make sure it's not File Explorer messing up. Resource overviews. Oops, complete wrong folder, but that's the other file that's going to export, which is the txt file. Just looks like this, similar to how it looked in CSGO. And that is going to define the radar in your level. But if you go to the actual right folder, which is panorama, images, overhead maps. And now we have this vtexc file here. So if we now look in game, it's not going to work, is it? Stupid, I don't have spawns or anything. But yeah, that will now work in game. The radar will show. You may want to reload the map if you already have it open, as the radar might not automatically update. But yeah, in case it's just reloading the map, and it should show the update and changes. So down in the bottom left, we've got console. This basically just gives you some debugging output, just an idea of how it's gone. If there's been any problems, you'll probably see some red, potentially kind of an orange or a yellow, depending on what the error or warning, how severe it is. But yeah, any problems, first bet, probably just look down here and you might see some useful information in there. So we'll come back to multi-level radars. So what I'll quickly do is I'll actually add a higher up level. Let's just do this. Let's just shove it over here. Pretend it's just this. So we now have a second level to our map. Very high up. Make sure they're in. Let's just add them to RadGen path. Okay. So we're going to go through multi-level radars. This is the area on the right hand side where you're going to define them. In regards to the actual, as it is now, it's not a multi-level radar, it's a single level radar. What you can actually do is tweak the intensity of the colors by using the max, min, and kind of middle bars here, or midpoints or whatever you want to call them. So these can be used, yeah, obviously without being multi-level radars as well, just a single level radar. What they do is, at the moment, top and bottom, they're at the extents of the height, or the top and the bottom parts in our VMap in Hammer that we actually have RadGen stuff, so RadGen meshes. So at the moment, it would be a very dark blue at the very topmost point, which is going to be on the right hand side here, on that raised area we had over here. But what if we want to maybe show the blend between the areas better? We can just drag it down, and as you can see, it's going to say, right, more, well, anything above this height in the VMap is now going to show us the darkest blue point. So it doesn't show too well on a test map, but on an actual real fully fleshed out layout, this can work really well in showing the changes in heights a lot better. So if I was to drag this, say, up to here, I have that one there, the blend on the left hand side is starting to look really nice. You can mess with the midpoint as well and just tweak it however's best for you. What I'll quickly do is show you how this is done in Brewery. It's just loading the information from the VMap, so give it a couple seconds. There we go. So as you can see here, I actually have the min point dragged up quite high, and it allows for a more, how do I explain that? A more noticeable blend between the heights in the different areas. Max bar being quite low, min bar being quite high, and then this midpoint's down as well. So if I actually move that midpoint back to the middle, you can see how it looks quite dull. And then as soon as I move it down here, it's a lot more vibrant, a lot more of a brighter colour in the middle. And that was just what I did to make it look nicer. If I actually drag these back to the top and bottom, put that back to the middle, it just looks a bit dull. The blends aren't that nice. It just allows you to mess with it more. I like the fact that the outside was very dark blue. Drag that down there. And yeah, you can see the change is a lot nicer between the lower and upper areas of the bomb site. This warehouse is obviously higher up than the outside, but as you get in here, you're getting higher up. It's something to play with, but you can definitely make it look nicer depending on the changes you make to that. So if I was to now add a multi-level, well, I'd turn it into a multi-level radar, all I need to do is click this add button here. Immediately, we've got 2 levels in the map. If I save this, it's automatically going to work in game as a multi-level radar. What you want to do is make sure that this is around the point between, well, at a height Z value in the VMap. Units wise, which is shown here, where you want it to split. So for us, anywhere above this edge, below this other mesh is perfect. Just show then hammer, anywhere above this edge, below this face. So anywhere in here on the height wise, it's going to work perfect for us. You can tweak it. Obviously, you're not going to have something like this necessarily in your map. You might want it to change in the middle of a stairway, something like that. Just something to play around with. So for us, we've got it there. You can click on each level to see what each one looks like. It shows obviously which one you've got selected as well. If you wanted to add more levels, you click add, allows up to 10. Obviously for this map, we only want just the 2. Now, as you can see, we've got separate gradients here for each level. Not something you would commonly see on a multi-level radar, if I remember correctly. This is showing solid blue solely because it's the only face on that level. If I was to make this look a little better, do something like that, I'm going to update from VMap. And now you can see how it's blending separately, because we've got blue here, but the low point on this one isn't necessarily blue. So if we want to change that, and we want to use one gradient throughout the whole of the radar, regardless of levels, we can untick this separate multi-level radar gradients option. I think that actually is deselected by default, if I remember correctly. Now, as you can see, we only have the 3. It ignores the fact that they're separate levels, and this is no longer blue because that's now actually on the mid kind of area in the VMap. Height wise, it's actually more in the middle. If you obviously go from the bottom to the top of everything in the VMap. And that's just how you basically just mess with that. We could obviously just tweak this if we really wanted to, mess around with it, whatever's best for you. And that's that. You can also change the default level. This doesn't really matter too much. It just defines which is classed as the main level in your map. Anything above it will be, say, higher 1, higher 2, higher 3. Anything below it will be lower 1, lower 2, so on, assuming you have lots of levels. Doesn't matter too much in CS2. In CSGO, it was more a thing because of the main level being the one that was shown in the loading screen, but it doesn't show that in the loading screens anymore. But still worth saying, in my opinion. It doesn't really mean any change for you in regards to any workflow or anything. Doesn't really matter if you leave it or not. And you can just disable the multi-level radar right here without actually changing your stuff on the right hand side if you don't want to lose any information. So you could use this for temporarily debugging, whatever it is. That's an option you've got. Other than this, there's two more things to go into actually. So first one being the different render a preview kind of options. So we've got the top down, which is standard, what you're going to see inside of your actual radar is going to be outputted as being a top down image. However, you've got a couple more options. You can actually do the, this is a 2D final output preview. The top down allowed me to move it. If I was to now click into the 3D view, this allows me to move around and actually inspect it in more detail. So WASD to move around, and if you right click, you can move your mouse, change your angle, similar to, well, it's the same controls as hammer, and then scroll wheel up and down to increase and decrease speed at which you move at. So this is just a nice way to inspect everything, see how it all looks, especially for the people like me who might get quite obsessive with making sure all the details look correct. It's a nice way to just view it that way. So what I'll actually do is very quickly go to this and show an example of this here that Angel made, which is just this video here showcasing him flying around. I want to say Inferno, if I remember correctly. Yeah, it looks like Inferno. And it's just him flying around the whole of Inferno, and all he's done there is added basically all material, everything apart from props to the path material, and then just added props to the cover selection set. Sorry, not material. And yeah, you can fly around and inspect it, which is pretty awesome. So other than that, the only thing left to cover on the UI is kind of the history here. So I should probably save another image to show the changes in history. Let's save that. There we go. So as you can see, we now have two history items. The first one being back the previous time I clicked save, which we obviously had different colours. And we didn't have a multi-level radar back then. We didn't have the higher area. But since then, as I've just saved it now, we've changed the upper colour to pink. And we now have a multi-level radar, which is why it's showing it with the slash showing the two different levels. Now, two pretty neat things you can do, which I quite like, is you can actually pin them. So currently, the limit is 10. Once you hit 10 histories, it will remove the oldest one and replace it with a newer one when you click save. However, I quite like to keep old history items for each version that I release of a map, be that to just look back at, just for historical sakes or whatever. It's also useful just for going back and getting old configuration settings if you want to mess around with, say, colours, this, that, the other settings. You can then just click back and reload settings from a previous one as easy as this. Just click, and then you might want to save again, and then it's going to save with those settings. But yeah, what you can do is you can actually pin them. So if I was to say pin this one, or I'll tell you what, let's say we pin this one. What will happen is when this hits 10 histories, this one would be removed if we then saved again. Obviously this pin one would move to here, But then if we save again, the pin one would not be deleted. It would be the one newer than the pinned item that would actually be removed, because the pin one will never be removed. And that's the whole point of pinning it. What you can also do is right click and actually give it a little tag name if you want to. I'm going to call it V1. Obviously it's not very viewable with the colours we've chosen, but let's say a little bit better. V0, V1, whatever. You can actually just right click, type, click enter, and you've got a nice little message if you want to. That basically covers the full UI, except from this final render button up here, which just gives you an option for viewing different masks of your level, ambient occlusion, etc. Normals, it's pretty neat. But yeah, the final render is the one that you're going to see in game, and that's actually going to be exploited. So generally, you're going to be using this. And that covers everything. Cheers, guys.